May 10, 2008, Patricia Quinn, Executive Director of Northern New England Passenger Rail Authority, gave a presentation about the Downeaster passenger train, which runs daily round trips from Portland to Boston. The presentation was made at the annual meeting of the 470 Club and the Maine Rail Group at Hollowell City Hall. This meeting was part of a day trip on the Maine Eastern Railroad between Rockland and Augusta.
And I also appreciate the work that Jack and all of you do to help support passenger rail among the residents of the state of Maine and also among the legislature. What I'm going to do today is just kind of give you a little overview of the service, kind of where we've come from, where we are, and where we're going. And we've got some very exciting things to talk about today. First of all, let me just talk to you a little bit about Northern New England Passenger Rail Authority. We refer to ourselves as NEPRA. Kind of what we do. It's funny, our chairman, I think, sizes it at best when he says that we don't run trains, but we make trains run. NEPRA is actually an organization of 5 people. Myself, I'm the director. We have a marketing manager, manager of passenger services, a finance manager, and a data analyst. So there are 5 of us. We're kind of like the Turnpike Authority is to the roads, we are to passenger rail. We were actually created by the Maine State Legislature in the mid-90s for the purposes of restoring passenger rail service to Maine after about a 30-year hiatus, and now running passenger rail service in Maine. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what we do. First of all, the Downeaster is not an Amtrak service. The Downeaster is the state of Maine service. It belongs to all of us. It was established because of the work of advocates, Train Riders Northeast, but groups like yours as well, who petitioned the legislature to get the funding together to restore passenger rail service to Maine. We contract with Amtrak to operate that service, and NEPRA is the organization that holds that contract with Amtrak. We actually have a 20-year operating agreement with Amtrak. We're into year number 7 right now. And part of that 20-year contract was that they provide equipment for us. So the equipment that we use for the Downeaster service between Portland and Boston is actually owned by Amtrak, and we have it under contract. We actually, part of that contract includes the use of 3 train sets. Our typical consist is 3 passenger cars, a split cafe club, a locomotive on one end, and a cab bag car on the other end, and we operate it as a push-pull unit. Also the crews, our Amtrak crews on board the train. We also, as part of our operating agreement with Amtrak, contract with them for reservations. So when you want to book a ticket on the Downeaster, you go on the Downeaster website, but when it's time to purchase your ticket, you bounced over to Amtrak. So it's amtrak.com or 1-800-USA-RAIL. And also we contract with them for ticket agents in Portland. Portland is the only place where we actually have our own dedicated ticket agents. And also as part of that, they maintain the equipment for us under contract with Drumac out of Portland. So that's what Amtrak does for us, and obviously they're our biggest partner. And in fact, what NEPRA does is we manage all of the partners who make the Downeaster operate the way you know it does today. We also obviously have to have operating agreements with the railroad, and NEPRA is a third party to these agreements between Amtrak and the host railroads. We operate on 2 host railroads. 78 miles from Portland to Plastown, New Hampshire on the state line is owned by Pan Am, formerly Guilford, and also the remaining 38 miles into Boston is owned by the MBTA. As you know, different from a bus company or a trucking company, when you're dealing with the railroad, we don't own the road. It's and it's not the road is not provided for us by the taxpayers. It's private property, and we have to lease with them with the insurance and payment to operate over the line, operating agreements to have access to the line, and also pay to maintain the line to passenger rail standards. If you remember, it was about a 12-year process to get the Downeaster here, and most of that was in getting the money to rehabilitate that 78 miles between Portland and Plastow, which had only been used for freight service previously. Many of you who rode today up to Augusta on the train realize that it takes a lot of money to restore that rail to run at 79 miles an hour, which is what we do. We also contract For food service, the Downeaster is the only Amtrak-operated service in the whole country that operates its own food service, and that's under contract with NEPRA. We work with a company called Epicurean Feast out of Maynard, Massachusetts, and they provide our food service. The neat part about that is we're able to introduce Maine products and showcase Maine products on board the train. For instance, we have Amato sandwiches, Legal Seafoods clam chowder, which is out of Boston. We have these great local whoopie pies that we sell on board, and of course the great microbrew beers from Portland, Shipyard and Geary's. We also manage the marketing for the Downeaster. If you've seen the ads on TV or heard or in the newspaper or heard them on the radio, all of those ads actually come out of NEPRA, and we contract with a company called Latchet Creative. They are our advertising agency, and they do all the marketing for us. Also, Train Riders Northeast. Jack mentioned Wayne Davis, and Train Riders was very involved in getting the service here. But one of their key functions for us right now is that they manage a train host program. Maine and North Carolina are the only two Amtrak services in the country that have a train host program, which is volunteers who ride on board to provide information about the train, about our station communities, to the passengers on board. And of course, one of the main reasons that NEPRA was actually created to begin with, which was to hold the insurance liability for the Downeaster. We manage all the contracts for all the liability along the line. So that's a little bit about what NEPRA does. Now the Downeaster itself, after a 12-year process, as I said, and about a $54 million investment in infrastructure, the Downeaster actually started operating on December 15th of 2001. When it started, there were 4 round trips a day, and now, as most of you probably know, we operate 5 round trips a day between Portland and Boston. Again, we do that using those same 2 train sets, and we have one as a protect. Who's our business? Pretty much everybody is our business. Growing more and more, our commuter business. The first train out of Portland in the morning leaves at 6 o'clock in the morning. That train operates right now at about a 95% load factor, with people commuting back and forth to Boston. Now most of those folks do travel between our stops in New Hampshire and Boston, but it's very, very popular among commuters. Lots of tourists take the train to come northbound to Maine, and in fact that's a market that we're really going to capitalize on this year, because with our 5th round trip we now offer a better schedule for people to come to Maine for a day, so tourists. But most of the passengers on the Downeaster, about 85% of the people who ride right now, are on the Downeaster because they're headed to Boston, either for work, a medical appointment, a school field trip, to go home from college, to go to college, to go to a Red Sox game. In fact, we love Boston sports. As the Celtics go, so does the Downeaster, so that's been very good for us. We service a total of 10 stations over the 3 states between Portland and Boston. All of them are year-round stations with the exception of Old Orchard Beach. Old Orchard opens sometime in April, and we usually stop there through the end of October. And that's a great stop for us. When we started, Durham, New Hampshire, incidentally, was only a part-time station. We started Friday through Sunday, and then it was Friday through Monday, and after about 2 years we opened it up to 7-day-a-week service, and now Durham is about the 4th largest stop that we have on the route. And also when we started almost 7 years ago, our travel time between Portland and Boston was 2 hours and 45 minutes. Which I'll show you in a minute. It created some challenges for us, but as you know, it's not very time competitive with the automobile. But we now operate those 5 round trips at a travel time end-to-end of 2 hours and 25 minutes, which is quite an accomplishment for us. Since we started operating, the Downeaster has transported 1.9 million riders. We've also generated about $27 million in ticket revenue and taken over 160 passenger miles off the roads. And that's really a very significant number. That means that if everybody who rode the Downeaster drove their car, that would be 160 million miles on the roads. Looking at the conditions of what our roads are, you can see that that's really a contribution to the environment and to the bottom line of our state. In fiscal year 2008, we're looking at reaching about 418,000 riders. Now, a little chart over to the right there, you kind of see this dip. 2002 was the first full year that we were in operation, and again, after I'm sure you all remember, 12 years the train was coming. In fact, there were people right up until the day before we started running who didn't think this train was ever going to come. And we started running, and it was kind of a novelty. Everybody wanted to ride it. But very quickly, getting into year 2, we realized that our ridership was falling off. And the reason was that we had positioned ourselves as more of an attraction than as a transportation provider. And it was by going back to the basics of the things I just talked about, thinking about schedule, frequency, on-time performance, and travel time, focusing on the basics, we truly became a transportation alternative. We kind of bottomed out there in 2004. The Democratic National Convention in Boston, where we shut down service for 10 days, really didn't help us very much. Very slowly crawled out of that hole after that. But in April of 2005 was when we made our first big change in our service, which was reducing the travel time from 2:45 to 2.5, and it was really like a light switch went off. All of a sudden, people started looking at us as a transportation alternative to their automobile. Because let's face it, we all love our cars, and if we're going to be in our cars, we're going to give them up and park them. We're going to want things to be convenient for us. We're going to want to know that we can get back and forth when we want to and in a reasonable period of time. And ridership just began to soar from there. Coupled with that was when we saw gas prices, I know this is hard to imagine, actually go over $2 a gallon, $2.25, $2.50. Doesn't that seem like a long time ago? And as gas prices rose, so did our ridership. So in 2004, we saw a ridership of 250,000 passengers. Again, as I said, this year we're projecting ridership of 418,000 passengers. We're well on our way. And in fact, I just received word yesterday that April 2008 was our best month ever in the history of our service, 42,000 passengers in 1 month. You can clap. Come on, let's go. That ridership is actually about 21% over last year. Our revenue is also continuing to grow over last year. And in addition to that, we're very proud. Amtrak and the host railroads do a fabulous job for us. We're #1 in the Amtrak system for customer service, among other peer services, and we're also among the best in on-time performance. We slipped a little bit this winter. The snow really raised havoc with our operation in Portland. We don't have any place to keep those trains inside, and all that snow we had, we ran into some mechanical problems. But in that month of 42,000 passengers, our on-time performance was 92%, which isn't too bad. Who rides the Downeaster? Now, as I said, it operates between Portland and Boston, but it is definitely not a Southern Maine train. People from other parts of Maine, especially in the legislature, you know, there's that whole separation of the two Maines. But really, the Downeaster serves everybody, even though we only go as far as Portland right now. In fact, we did a survey last year, and in that survey, we represented within about a 10-day period, we interviewed about 1,500 passengers, and 175 different Maine towns were represented among that sampling, which I thought was pretty impressive. The other interesting thing is that 40% of the people who live in Maine who ride the Downeaster actually live outside of Portland and Cumberland and York counties. So that means they came from parts inside the state. Also, 52 Maine towns, 90 Massachusetts towns, and people from 38 states and 6 countries outside of Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. So again, as we demonstrated to the policymakers, this isn't a Portland project. This is actually a regional transportation alternative. But beyond the train just going back and forth, the other things that we have seen as a byproduct of the Downeaster is it really is an economic engine. And I think when Train Riders Northeast first introduced the idea of restoring passenger rail to Maine, it wasn't just to give people a nice trip. It was because they understood, and the policymakers at the time, those who gave the tens of millions of dollars on the federal level to invest, understood that this was really more about a train ride. It was about moving people efficiently and generating income overall for the state of Maine. I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. First of all, passenger rail is important to Maine's competitiveness. Having transportation connections in addition to roads and highways also adds to Maine's attractiveness. As companies are looking for where they're going to invest and where they want to set up a business, they look for accessibility. So the more alternatives that there are, the more appealing our area becomes. It's also an important tool in supporting a vibrant economy, and it also benefits freight services because obviously that upgrade in the line from a 25-mile-an-hour Class 2 railroad to a 79-mile-an-hour Class 4 railroad helps freight businesses as well. So it's really important, and again, it's getting more and more costly to upgrade roads. What's this stretch of 18 miles that's going to be upgraded here on 295 this summer? $28 million to repave that road. So it's important that alternatives be looked at. Incidentally, one of my very favorite statistics is that 1 mile of double-track railroad has the hourly carrying capacity of 14 lanes of highway. And if you look at our environment, you look at how important the environment is in our green spaces to us, particularly here in Maine, looking at where we're going to put our dollars, I think that's pretty easy to see. Also, we provide mobility. As this winter was a perfect case in point, it's not always nice and sunny here. And when it snows and the airplanes are grounded and the buses can't operate, the Downeaster run's almost always on time. Also completely accessible, and as our state ages, in fact Maine has the oldest median age population in the country, it's going to be more and more important to find alternatives because it's expensive and it really isn't a whole lot of fun to drive a car. Kind of going back to your wallet and your pocketbook, transportation costs, even though they seem kind of invisible to us, transportation costs are actually the second largest household expense in the average American household budget. First is shelter, where you live, and number 2 is transportation. On average, 17% of the Americans' household budget is spent on transportation. And again, this statistic is a few months old, so as those gas prices go up, that changes as well. And it's important to understand that affordability of where you live is directly related to your transportation costs. For instance, while it might be, if you work in Portland, it might be a little less expensive to buy a house in Buxton or Gorham. If you have to pay a lot more money to travel into work every day, all of a sudden that house becomes more expensive. And as gas prices go up, we're recognizing that. Another interesting statistic is that in Maine, gasoline consumption on an annual basis is about 1.7 billion gallons a year. If you divide that out over a 12-month period, and you'll take a look at what that is, every time gas goes up 20 cents, and in fact it just went up 20 cents over the course of the last few weeks, that takes about $28 million per month out of the Maine economy. Now, as our legislators were just looking at a shortfall of $100 million, in 4 months, they lost $100 million more out of the Maine economy because people are just putting it in the gas tanks and it's going out the tailpipe. So it's important to look at alternatives. If you look at what it costs a business to reimburse a traveler to travel back and forth between Portland and Boston, again, the IRS reimbursement rate just went up to, I think, 50.5 cents a mile. This right here is based on 48.5 cents a mile. If you're a company or you're a business travel and you figure it's going to cost you 48.5 cents a mile to travel, use your car to get from Portland to Boston, and you divide that out, if you look at the cost of the reimbursement, the tolls, and parking, it's going to cost you about $118 and change to go back and forth to Boston. You can buy a round-trip ticket on the Downeaster 3 days in advance for $39 or $24 if you walk up to the counter and do it that day. Again, significant savings. Another important thing is that demographics are changing, and there are more and more married couples that don't have children who are looking to live in places where they're not so much in the suburbs. But again, all of these environmental considerations and these financial considerations are making people really think about where they want to settle. And kind of going back to the old neighborhood ideas. You remember we had sidewalks and you could walk to get a gallon of milk? I get in my SUV and drive 5 miles down to Hannaford to pick up a gallon of milk, but be able to walk around communities and do things closer. And those are trends that are happening around around the nation. Passenger rail and the availability of train stations within communities actually helps foster these developments. And many of these developments around the country are happening around train stations. Now, my guess is that if in 2003 or 2004 we came and talked about that those things were going to happen here, people would say that's never going to happen in Maine. And in fact, many actually said it's never going to happen in Maine. But actually what we found that it really is. Because in addition to the great transportation benefits provided by the Downeaster, we've seen tremendous economic development along the Downeaster route. Old Orchard Beach, since we started operating and stopping there, 808 new residential housing units have been built in Old Orchard Beach. Complete renaissance, changing from a tourist community to more of a residential community. That includes, or in addition to, a $22 million Queen Victorian condominium complex on the waterfront. Really a change in the whole complexion, and the leaders of that community know that it's the accessibility. That doesn't mean that all of those people are riding the train every day, but it just means if you live elsewhere, knowing that there's that connection there makes a place seem closer and is more desirable to live. Saco Island is another prime example. When we first started stopping in Saco, we didn't even have a station there. We had cardboard laid down for people to get off the train and walk through the mud. And we have a platform there, and in the backdrop is all these huge abandoned mills. Developers come in and they're investing more than $100 million to restore and redevelop those mills into residential units, retail, commercial space, waterfront condominiums on the Saco River with boat slips in them, restaurants, all kinds of things. That project is going to generate 400 jobs, a payroll of more than $12 million a year, $14 million a year, and that gives back to the state $2.7 million in taxes on an annual basis. That site was chosen because of its proximity to the Downeaster line. We see these things going forward as well, and that's why the next step has been long-term with the project since we started operating between Portland and Boston, is to bring this service to Brunswick. There are lots of reasons for that. We talked about congestion. I-295 is becoming more and more congested. Also Route 1. Up Route 1 through the mid-coast, that's the bread and butter of our tourism industry along the coast. And it's very important that we can't, remember the statistic of highway lanes going outwards? It's very important that we provide economical transportation alternatives for tourists wanting to come to the mid-coast region. Also, the Rockland branch was there and had been restored many years ago to the tune of $40 million and is basically a stranded piece of railroad. Maine Eastern has done a fabulous job operating an excursion service there, but again, it's difficult when you have a road that's not connected to an economic center, and in our case in New England, that's Boston. Economic development is also important with the pending closure of the Brunswick Naval Air Station, and is that as our state is looking to redevelop that property and have a renaissance in that area, as the Naval Air Station closes, the availability of transportation connections is very important. Governor Baldacci supported expanding the service to Brunswick. And going up the Pan Am line. There are a couple ways that have been talked about how to get to Brunswick, but certainly the most efficient thing to do is to take the existing Pan Am freight line, splits off at Royal Junction, through Yarmouth Junction, splits at Yarmouth Junction, Royal Junction, and meets up with the Rockland branch, where it meets up with the Maine Eastern and continues on to Rockland. A very, very important thing, and basically it connects the dots, because what was missing from a rail corridor from Boston to Rockland was just the 30 miles between Portland and Brunswick. The governor was extremely supportive of this plan and wanted very much to see this connection happen. So we went back to Pan Am Railroad, talked to them, and asked what it would take to upgrade their line to Class 3 passenger standards so that we could operate service on their line. And they gave us a work plan which included replacing all the rail with continuously welded rail, replacing about 27,000 ties, upgrading the grade crossings, and signalizing all along the line for a price tag of about $31.5 million. I'm happy to report, with Jack's help, and he was there and with us as we made all the reports to the legislature this year, that a mechanism was put in place this past year to dedicate funds into a pot of money so that we can go out and borrow that money. Our intention is to borrow the money this summer to start work on it, and by 2010, with our existing train sets, with our existing Amtrak crews, we'll have a new station in Freeport, a new station in Brunswick, and the Downeaster will be in Brunswick, meeting up with the Maine Eastern Railroad 2 to 3 times a day, and we're very excited about that. Also, the state's plan is to rehabilitate the St. Lawrence and Atlantic line that currently runs from the B&M Baked Bean plant in Portland through Yarmouth Junction to Lewiston and Auburn, and build a new corridor parallel to 295. That will enable the development of commuter service between Lewiston, Auburn, into Yarmouth Junction and into Portland as congestion grows going forward. And down the road, steps are being made, for instance, in the Mountain Division to restore that to a healthy freight and passenger corridor, and eventually make connections through Lewiston and Auburn to Montreal. The key to all of this is sustained funding, because you can do almost anything with money, and it costs a lot of money to maintain our infrastructure and also to support the operations of the Downeaster service. And lots of times we read headlines in the paper about these millions of dollars that it costs. $10 million a year to support the operation of the Downeaster, $2.5 million to pay back the loan that we're going to borrow. But the important thing to remember is that other modes of transportation are funded at much higher levels than passenger rail are. They don't have nearly the benefits that we have. That chart up there in the upper left-hand corner shows the top line is highways, next is aviation, and that green line down the bottom is what Amtrak gets every year. But that's always the headline, is what Amtrak gets. The difference is that the gas tax provides a mechanism to fund the repair and building of roads and highways in our country. And without a dedicated mechanism to save money and invest money in railroad infrastructure, it's always going to seem unfair. But the Maine legislature recently took a very, very strong step by dedicating some funds to the STAR account for our expansion, and I think have committed themselves to really looking at alternatives going forward. I also just want to take the opportunity to again thank Governor Baldacci and the legislative leadership this year for this bold action, for understanding that the investments that we make right now in the operation of the service and preserving the infrastructure that exists and improving on it to expand passenger rail as a transportation alternative in our state is really a key to preserving our environment and getting our state to a place of stronger economic vitality. It's important as we move forward, and we're very fortunate that the leaders here have recognized that. Also, the congressional delegation, who have been behind us 100%. So I ask your continued support, to be vocal in your support, because people hear you. We're going to continue to keep doing the work to sustain the service that we have and grow it. And 2 years from now, we'll see you in Brunswick and Rockland. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.